Hey, I want to tell you a true story. In 1894, there was a young boy born to parents, and the people attending his birth told them that he is not going to live very long. He has TB, and the parents couldn't accept that. And that's just like what would happen today. So they decided to move up a little bit further north. They were living in Iowa to where they could have farmland and have their family there because they really believed in at least getting out and having sunshine and good food. And the story goes that when this young man, oh, his name was Forrest Shackley, when he was about able to stand up, which was later than most children, his father would exercise his legs, really understanding that that was going to strengthen him. And I guess that created an interest because it says by the time he was a teenager, he loved reading McFadden's Physical Culture book. He was all into exercise. And so when it was time to pick a career, he decided to study chiropractic. And he said, I have nothing against being a physician. When asked, why don't you study to be a physician? He said, they treat disease, and I really want to focus more on just building health. So he graduated in 1915 from the Palmer School of Chiropractic. And during that time that he was studying there, he actually had done a good bit of research about the benefit of minerals that comes in vegetables. And he was also reading some of the scientific papers from a Polish biochemist named Casimir Funk. And they would often correspond about their findings. So Dr. Shackley decided to start a clinic. And in 1924, looking at my notes, he opened a clinic called the Shackley Clinic. He was administrator, he was a chiropractor, he had a physician, he had an osteopath, he had internists, general practitioners, and surgeons. And at that time, or a few years later, from about 1924 to 28, he spent a lot of time also developing just some very basic nutritional supplements that he would at least give his patients. And so it was really a thriving clinic. And he actually developed an eating plan. They didn't call it that then, but he said it was very similar. People have looked at it and said it was very similar to the food pyramid that we know so well now. Well, in 1924, there was a fire that destroyed that whole clinic. And of course, that was devastating. And while he was regrouping and thinking what he wanted to do, he decided to take one of the vans of the clinics, looked like a big old truck, and he outfitted it with bunks and an ice box and closets for fishing gear. And he and his wife and two sons actually went up toward Oregon and just lived off of the land and enjoyed that for quite some time. And then they decided they wanted to come a little further south, so they landed in Oakland, California, and that's where they lived. And he had his chiropractic practice for years and years. And his sons went to the University of California at Berkeley and graduated, went off into business. And about the time that Dr. Shackley was the age that most of us think about retiring, he had been thinking about this idea, and he called his two sons in and said, I want to know what you would think about this. I'd like for you to work with me. I'd like to develop a plan to where I can offer these food supplements that I've been offering to my patients for years and years to the general public. They thought about it and to his surprise agreed to go, even though they had professional careers too. And it took about 6 months to develop the plan. And his idea was, I don't want these products put in a retail store. I want people to really understand why they're different so they can tell their friends and their friends can tell others. And that's the way the company began. And so the first product was Pro-Lecithin Nibblers. And you think, well, I never heard of that. Well, it was a blend of protein and lecithin because Dr. Shackley said every cell in our body has those two nutrients and has a need for those two nutrients. And he said, I developed this at a time when Betty Crocker was just becoming popular, and so was Wonder Bread. And so the first year, that's the only product that they marketed. And, I can remember I was introduced to Shaklee a little less than 50 years ago. And I remember buying that Prolessa Nibbler. It was just sort of a little tablet that you would chew, didn't necessarily taste good or bad. Well, its next product, the very next year, was Herblax. And to this day, that's one of the biggest sellers. It's a combination of 9 herbs. One of them's a laxative, but mostly it's a body detoxer. And then he also developed Liquilee, and that's a liquid B vitamin supplement. I have it in there on my shelf now. Don't take it every day, but it does some amazing things when you need it. And then he also developed a multivitamin, and that's called Vitalee. And over the years, he improved that Vitalee. And there's many, many products, but that's just the beginning of the food supplement line. And I just want to tell you one more story. Most people, if they think of Shaklee Corporation now, they think of environmentally safe products. So the way that our pilot program product, Basic H, was developed was, I had a friend that came to him and said, my wife, her skin just gets so irritated every time she is bathing, and we don't understand it. And Dr. Shaklee said, well, it might be what's in soap. He said, actually, my family and I have been using a liquid that I developed for some time because it's very safe for the skin. And he gave him some, and then went on his way back he had a little facility there, and he said he was working on that formula of how to market it when one of the machines over in the other part of the place broke down, and they came and asked him to come help. And Dr. Shaklee said he got motor oil all over his hands, and he realized that when he got ready to wash them, that the hand that had the liquid from the formula he was working on for the cleaner, his hand just came clean as soon as he washed it underwater. I mean, the oil came right off. And that set in motion, realizing what a good cleaner that was. And so that was one of America's very first environmentally safe cleaners. And then a few years later, Dr. Shaklee actually introduced the first line of just natural skincare products. And it's a lot more I could tell you, but I just wanted you to know just the history of how it all began.